This podcast is created in partnership with Montclair. There's a crucial moment when coming down from the K2 summit, a sort of pinch point under the looming shadow of an enormous skyscraper of ice, jutting out into the void. Nowadays, everyone knows it as the bottleneck. But back then, on the night of July 31st, 1954, very few had yet seen it. While preparing to face the passage, Achille Compagnoni slips on a sheet of ice and starts to slide. Lino Lacedelli manages to save him at the last moment with the rope that he's secured around the ice axe. Just moments afterwards, they both realize that they're looking directly down a chute which plunges towards Camp 8, the steepest section of the descent. They are exhausted, tormented by thirst, and they need to make a choice. They decide to take the plunge, sliding down the snow-filled couloir. The chute seems to never end, apparently going on forever. The last lights of the sky have abandoned them. They're alone up there. No one is left to help them. 70 years ago, two Italians conquered K2, the second highest summit in the world. In this podcast, we tell their story to understand how important it was for an entire country. I'm John Vincent, and this is K2, Like Going to the Moon, a Cora Media podcast. The bottleneck, an inescapable passage that everyone must face in order to either climb the mountain or come back down. This place is mythical in and of itself, and mountaineers speak of it with fear. This is the decisive moment of any climb, which either makes you or breaks you. You need to be able to reach the point in the first place, and then pray that nothing goes wrong, that the ice doesn't come loose, or worse, because otherwise, you'll be lost forever. The bottleneck continues to present a grueling challenge today, like 70 years ago. But let's go back to 1954. After sliding on ice for what seems like forever, Lacedelli and Compagnoni find themselves in the spot where that very morning they retrieved their oxygen cylinders. Compagnoni realizes that he still has a small bottle of cognac on him. So they both take a drop of liqueur and they're off again. But soon enough, their flashlights go out and they're plunged into darkness. They know that a large crevice is coming up and they'll need to stay alert. But it's not enough just to be careful. They slip and start to slide. By miracle, they find themselves on the lower edge of the rift. Another close call. While he was sliding, Lacedelli lost his ice axe in the deep darkness. It's a serious issue, but at least this obstacle has been overcome as well. Lacedelli and Compagnoni go further and further down, without a clear idea of where they are. Later on, they'll realize that actually they were on the edge of the wall of ice looming over Camp 8. They have no idea how they got there, but they can't make the slightest mistake. They proceed in the dark and lower themselves at the point in which the wall is at its highest. Compagnoni goes down first. From above, Lacedelli keeps the rope steady, but it's not enough. Achille loses his balance and falls. Lino's hands are too cold to hold the rope fast enough. Compagnoni falls for 15 meters and lands right in the snow. The impact is hard, but by miracle, he's uninjured. For the second time, luck is on his side. Up above, Lacedelli searches for another way down. Suddenly, he slips too and falls for 3 meters. The soft snow saves him as well. At this point, they're on the slope at the shoulder of K2. They shout out, no answer. In the dark, they can just make out the tents of Camp 8, one of which lights up. A few moments later, they can hear the yells from their companions. They've made it. It's 11 p.m. on July 31st. The summit team is met by Abram, Gallotti, and Isacan, and by Bonatti and Mahdi, who had a difficult time the night before, struggling with great efforts to carry the oxygen tanks up to 8,100 meters, so they'd be ready for the team on the day of their final push to the summit. They found that the camp wasn't where it had been agreed upon previously, and after searching for their companions in vain, they found themselves dramatically forced to camp out in the open without any protections and almost died. At Camp 8, Lacedelli and Compagnoni are exhausted. It's a little warmer inside the tent and their fingers start to hurt. The tips are black and the pain keeps getting worse, to the point of being unbearable. Everyone tries to help them. It's been over 6 hours since they were first seen, as small as 2 little dots in the distance, coming down from the peak. And until now, in the utter darkness, they feared never seeing them again. The 2 mountaineers are now safe, but at the lower camps and at the base camp, no one knows it yet. When you're just a step from the goal, it's normal to think back at how it all began. The name that comes to mind right away is that of expedition leader Ardito Desio. How they reached the foot of K2 is a story in and of itself, with its own bold twists and turns. The project was supposed to take shape in 1928 to celebrate 10 years since the end of the Great War, financed by the Royal Italian Geographic Society and the city of Milan. The Fascist Party of Italy wanted to bask in the glory of 2 historic endeavors: the conquest of the North Pole by means of Umberto Nobile's airship expedition, and that of K2. The first would end tragically, with a serious accident and the death of many members of the mission, including Roald Amundsen, the great Norwegian explorer, who took off by plane to assist the Italians and never returned. Fearful of another similar embarrassment, the expedition to K2 is toned down to a more mundane exploration mission. The idea of a proper expedition comes up again right after the war. Geologist Ardito Desio tries to organize it, but the Pakistani government won't issue the permits to attempt the climb. But Desio doesn't give in. Once back in Italy, he requests permission to the government of Pakistan again, first for an expedition to the Baltoro Glacier in the summer of 1953, and then, finally, one to K2 a year later. Meanwhile, something is moving in the Alpine Club. An agreement is made with Desio in April of 1953, and the geologist is put in charge of the K2 project. Even the Italian president of the council, Alcide de Gasperi, moves to obtain the permit. The time is right. The expedition is underway. No one can deny that Desio was a great organizer. After all, in autumn of 1953, the expedition is still in doubt. Yet by March of the following year, over 250 mostly Italian companies are unloading to the port of Genoa 16 tons of material in 400 cases. This incredible result is all the tireless doing of Desio and of Ugo Angelino, a top mountaineer from Biella, as well as a logistics expert and manager along with his brother. Desio and Angelino go from one corner of Europe to another in order to examine the equipment from the previous expeditions to the Himalayas. They visit the Royal Geographical Society in London to study what the English brought with them to Everest in 1952. And then they travel to Berlin on the occasion of the return of Bull and the companions from Nanga Parbat. The materials chosen or had made are nothing less than state-of-the-art for the high mountain climbing of the time. From Vibram rubber soles, to Ettore Moretti tents, to Dalmine oxygen tanks, and Gottifredi Maffioli nylon ropes, as well as watches, altimeters, gas stoves, ice axes, traction cleats, and freeze-dried or long-lasting foodstuffs. Only the best in mountaineering equipment. 7,630 meters high in the sky, in the two small tents of Camp 8, the night is apparently endless. Compagnoni and Lacedelli are suffering terribly for the frostbite injuries they incurred on the summit. The same goes for Mahdi, who wasn't wearing his heavy reindeer fur boots while under the 9th camp with Bonatti. Freezing in the cold, but excited about their achievement. Once down there, they'll finally be able to celebrate. Once down there, it'll all be over. Finally, some actual rest. But it's not over yet. There's still another long stretch downwards, and it's going to take all the focus and energy that they can muster. Don't miss an episode of this series. Click on follow, and most importantly, hit the bell and rate 5 stars on Spotify. K2, Like Going to the Moon, is a Cora Media podcast, created in partnership with Moncler. It is written by Leonardo Bizzaro, Roberto Mantovani, Vinicio Stefanello, Luca Calzolari. The voice is by John Vincent. Editorial care is by Marco Villa, with the support of Sarah Poma. Translation is by John Vincent. Sound and music supervision is by Luca Micheli. Post-production and editing is by Cosma Castellucci. Sound engineer is Luca Possi. The project manager is Silvia Arcidiacono Mutti. The producer is Alex Peverengo. Post-production coordination is by Matteo Scelsa. Editorial support, Valeria Luzzi.